Morning, folks. I'm Tom McLaughlin, and this is Mark Guerringue, and this is Left and Right. It's Wednesday, December 5th, and we haven't met the two of us.
No, it's been a while.
much.
We last time was before the Kavanaugh hearings, and
Yeah.
we bet $1, and I lost. So I do owe you maybe a drink since it's the holiday season. Instead
That's
of
good.
$1.
You can't get a drink for $1,
No,
so
you
I'll
can't.
make out on that. Yeah, okay, sure. Well, welcome. This is Mark Guerringue. He's a newspaper publisher, 4 newspapers, right? Unless you've done some more since I've talked with you last. And I am a columnist, retired school teacher, and I'm sitting in the right chair, and Mark's sitting in the left chair. He's not completely left. I mean, there's a lot of overlap. Nothing is cut and dry.
You know,
these
someone
days.
pointed out to me is that when you're watching this show, you're on the left.
I'm on the left physically.
Like when you watch the show,
Yeah.
you're on the left and I'm on the right.
Because the cameras are over here, therefore I'm on the left. Yeah, and
You might want to switch that.
you know, I've thought of that, and we would, but usually the producer has these giant photographs of FDR with his little dog Fowler over there. It's not there today. And then here we got Reagan and William Buckley, but you can't, because of the way he made it and the way the camera angles are, he can't switch the backdrop to the other side. We've explored that.
Well, we don't want to, I don't know if the producer could do it since we heard about his little foray
But
last
people
night.
did
with
notice. Somebody else
Yeah.
noticed. Okay.
Oh, you've heard that before, or no?
No, I said no. I'm on the left here, physically speaking, but you know, not what would you call it, figuratively speaking. So anyway, but I mean, once we start to talk, it'll become apparent who's left and right. So so Kavanaugh got in, and that was the big story. It dominated what, 2 weeks or so in the news cycle.
Yeah, it's old now.
And now it's like, who? What's it? Okay, Kavanaugh. What? Oh yeah, and it's the news. I'm so aware of that you know what's hanging fire. Seems like it's the world tilts on this particular issue and what happens with it until something else happens, which could be the next day, and then it's just it's gone. It's not there anymore. And so, what would it be right now? I mean, the stock market crashing as we speak. I mean, is that the big story? But some people, if they don't own stock and don't see the
Well, the
importance of
G20
it,
was a big story. The
Yeah.
trade, the big story, and of course, President Bush dying is totally
That's it.
totally
There you go.
monopolizing the
Talk
news.
about long goodbyes. I think John McCain had died when we last did, and I was commenting on, have they buried him yet? I mean, how long is this going to take? So, I watch the news in Maine, so I'll watch Channel 13 for the weather, a little bit of local news before I switch over to Brett Baer at 6 o'clock. But it's all George H.W. Bush all the time, on either station. There's a main station, and he had Kenny Bunkport, and he spent every summer there of his life, and a lot of connections. But holy smokes, I mean, they were looking at his barber last night, and before I mean,
it gets old. It's sort of like when there's I always think that, I don't want to say that in deference to him, but like when there's a hurricane. Once the hurricane's done for us, then they just keep dragging it out and talking to people who have been disrupted by the hurricane. It's like, okay, let's move on, and it's kind of sad. But
he
that's
was a
the
good
way.
guy. I mean, I don't want to say anything that would denigrate him. I mean, it would be, he was a good man.
I've got my own little George Bush story, actually, that speaks
Did
to
he come to the sun during
No,
the cycle?
we weren't in existence, but it speaks to his civility, and this is in 1980 when he was running in the primary against Reagan. And he had a big show at the Red Jacket, and there were hundreds of people there. And I was really young. I was like 12. Well, actually, a little older than that, obviously. I was a young reporter. And so after he spoke, he was in the room milling around, and I was in my jeans, just a kid, and talking to him, asked him about the Panama Canal, because at that point it was in play because we were going to give it up. And so we had this little conversation, and this guy, older guy, like a business guy, came over with a suit and tie and basically started talking to George Bush and brushed me off. Like it was just like he didn't care, just a kid. And George Bush turned to him and he says, "Excuse me, sir, I want to finish my conversation with this young man." And I always remember that. It was just like struck me is that he didn't have to do that, but that was his instinct. He was what everybody's saying. He was just a very civil guy.
Well, he had a basic decency about him, and he talked about it when he was president. A few times he was interviewed that his parents drummed into him about the great I am. That was his phrase, and that was something to be disdained. Somebody that was very much interested, so self-oriented. And he said that was something he always tried to get away from, and I think he succeeded, and it worked for him. I mean, and he was probably the most, when it comes to foreign policy and diplomacy, what he did in that Gulf War is the textbook example of how to run a war. If you're going to have a war, that's how to do it.
Yeah, and he stopped. Like he could have gone.
Exactly.
And he stopped.
Yes. Overwhelming force. Yeah. Clear objective. And once the objective is met, that's declare victory and then get the hell out.
Right.
And it was brilliant.
Well, certainly for Republicans, it's sort of a throwback to the way the Republican Party was. So, like, does it endear that kind of feeling for you, being a Trumpian person now, when it's just so opposite? Like, one of the things they're saying that Bush couldn't stand Trump.
No.
For obvious reasons. He just didn't get him.
Who didn't get who?
Bush did not get Trump. Like, he just couldn't understand, it's fundamentally understand how someone could act that way.
Well, it's so opposite from what his ideal of what a person should be, Trump represents. But also, Bush was hard on what's his name? They called him low energy, the governor of Florida.
Oh, Jeb.
Jeb Bush. But I think that when I look back, I'm thinking, is that the worst insult that Jeb Bush is a low energy guy? And then he was critical of W for the Gulf War.
Well, you're right. But in the interview that I saw,
not the Gulf War, excuse me, the invasion of Iraq.
Right, the invasion of Iraq. But this was when Trump was in his birther mode, like in 2010 and 11, when he was just starting to.
Oh,
that Trump was in his birther mode of, with Obama and the whole birther thing.
Yeah.
And that's what the thing that I was referencing is that's when Bush was quoted as basically saying Trump is a whatever he was.
Oh, really? Yeah, even before he became a presidential contender?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anyway.
All right. Anyway, first one. Here we go. I didn't intend to talk about George H.W. Bush. What repercussions should Saudi Arabia suffer, given the CIA's conclusion that the Saudi Crown Prince, ordered the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi? Why do you think President Trump has so far not indicated he believes the CIA's conclusion? Why do we think that Trump has not so far said he believes it? Well, all right, I'll try it. Because if he said he believes it, and then it gives it power, and he would then not be able to it would make it more difficult for him to implement his policy, which is basically not to change the policy that he has already set up. That is, the alliance between the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, the Sunnis, Israel and the Sunni Arabs, against Iran and the Shiite Arabs. And that Iran is perceived as the threat by Trump and by Bolton and by Secretary of State. And that national security team now doesn't want anything to threaten our working relationship, our alliance with Saudi Arabia, not to mention the hundreds of millions in arms deals that billions actually in arms deals, not hundreds of billions, but several billions in U.S. weapons that the Saudis are ready to buy, ready to purchase. So I think that's it. I mean, and I would tend to agree with that in realpolitik terms, that, you know, okay, Khashoggi was killed, but why? I mean, this stuff happens all the time, especially in the Middle East. I mean, this one was particularly gruesome in that they dismembered the guy while he was still alive, evidently. But, I mean, if he were not a columnist for the Washington Post and therefore a journalist, would American media have their, you know, their underwear in a twist as much as they do? What do you think?
Well, I think this represents the worst of Trump, because it's all about trade-offs. I mean, we've acted badly. Our country has acted badly in the Middle East for generations, supporting the Shah. We support, you know, we do. And in fact, in role reversal, I was not supporting, but when I was against the war, the invasion of Iraq, it was just for that realpolitik reason, is that Hussein really was the buttress against Iran at that time. And I remember your columns were saying he's got to go because he was just a thug. He was a bad guy. So to me, you were representing the ideals of America. He's a bad guy, he's got to go. Back then, because you did support the war.
I did,
You
yeah.
did. And which obviously was probably our worst foreign policy decision in history. But now, so there's no question about that, that we do and accept terrible things in the Middle East. We always have. But at the same time, there's a certain amount of trade-offs, and we do stand for something. We are, you know, we're the only country in the world, basically, that has to have some moral imperative. And just not to say anything, particularly when, just yesterday, when the CIA director, Gina, what's her name, came out, and the senators came out and said, absolutely, this guy, the Crown Prince, was behind it. I mean, it was just obvious. And then for Trump, one, he could just split the goalposts. He could say, this is a terrible thing, you know, let us be the beacon of decency in the world, and then let it go on. And we've done that before. So not only did he not do that, so there is no beacon of decency.
He didn't acknowledge
He didn't acknowledge it,
obvious,
but the fact that he's not believing our intelligence agencies, that's the worst part. He's every step of the way, he's undermining our institutions. And, you know, I'm all for righting our wrongs with our institution, but when it's just that black and white, and this is the top, this is it. This is who, you know, we represent what's good in the world. I mean, we have symbolically, it's important to the world that we do this. And the fact that he doesn't do that and he keeps undermining it is, to me, the worst part of Trump. And two other points. One is that I think that if he hadn't been so obsequious to these autocrats in the world, including Putin and Saudi Arabia, that guy, Khashoggi, wouldn't have been sliced up. Like, part of the reason he did is because he knew he could get away with it, I think. And the reason, and we also know that Trump has connections with the Saudis. Back in the 80s, his father bailed out Trump. You know, he bought his fancy big yacht for like $50 million or some crazy thing. So Trump it's always about the money with Trump. You know, it's about, so he's got personal connections with in addition to all those political reasons you mentioned, which are true, but there's just something more than that. And the fact that Trump doesn't have any moral compass means that he can't put the right pieces together so he can pull it off, still represent our country the way it should be, and still get things done in a realpolitik way, as you said.
I think you're right when you say that he could accomplish the realpolitik aim of continuing our alliance with the Saudis against Iran and still acknowledge what a horrendous thing was done to this guy, the Khashoggi. And if he were to pause and allow and listen to the advice of, you know, his staff, who would probably tell him what you just said, he shoots from the lip and he says things and does things, and he is too quick to make a judgment. And if it means that, you know, he does see this as a threat, and he always has. That's why, like, there was a tape. Are you going to listen to the tape of this guy getting cut up? I mean,
right.
The screams and yells and all that. And he's not. I didn't listen to it, and I'm not going to listen to it. I don't want to listen to it. I mean, that's fine, but you still, because the world is seeing and hearing what happened to this guy, it's visceral with everybody, and you have to acknowledge that. But he won't. He just won't, because he doesn't take the time to think, even if it were insincere, which it probably would be. He doesn't. He doesn't even see the political value of doing that. You know?
Well, so not only, I mean, I would argue that not only doesn't he think about it in a calculating way, which would, I'd have more respect for him if he actually really was calculating in an evil way, but that's just him. Like you say, he shoots from the lip, shoots from the hip, shoots from the tweet, and the fact that that's really his inner self coming out, you know, and that's the scary part. He really doesn't have any empathy for anything. That's how he feels. He doesn't care. He just doesn't care. And I think that's pretty hard. You know, he just, everything you see is what he is, good or bad. And
it's also his strength that he can make decisions like that. And his instincts about where something is going have so far, it's only 2 years, but have proven to be pretty astute. But the way he handles it, I mean, his PR is extremely lacking, always has been. But I mean, look how he went through the campaign the way he did. I mean, nobody'd ever seen somebody like this that was getting as much attention as this in winning primaries and talking the way he did.
Yeah.
And it was his strength that got him there.
Yeah.
And what he's doing with the media since then, you're the enemy of the people, you're fake news, et cetera, et cetera. It's working for him.
Well, it worked for him. I mean, it is. It's both. It's certainly with his strength, and we don't want to debate the 2016 election. I mean, it really was a perfect storm of all those reasons. But you also could argue that his time is running out, like with the midterms that we just had. I mean, locally here, I know you're a Maine guy, but we just swept. I mean, Conway, with all our local reps, had Frank McCarthy, Karen Umberger, Gene Chandler, Speaker of the House, all these people that I endorsed. Now, I'm a liberal guy, but we endorsed these people in the newspaper because
I read those. Yeah.
Because of the institutional knowledge and the power that they have, and they were swept out for no good reason, except the only reason was, and and this is just my take on it, is mostly because they just wanted to change the tone, because of Trump. That's why these voters came out, and even down ballot to these reps, the people who voted against Karen Umberger and Frank McCarthy, it's not they didn't want them in.
Because they were Republicans.
They were just Republicans. They just got swept out. I mean, the northern New England now is totally blue, right? Maine's blue. New Hampshire's blue. Massachusetts has always been blue. Vermont's like past blue. So I think you might have to think about moving. You might have to move.
I mean, red in the sense of it's communist almost, rather than red in the sense, yeah.
So I don't know about you, Tom. I think you might be looking at moving to South Carolina or someplace.
Well, my guy, I didn't really care for, I can't,
Who?
Poloquin, Ed
Poloquin, yeah.
Who was our congressman, who did win the plurality of the votes, but because of this convoluted, weighted voting system he ended up, because he didn't get a 51% or over half, over 50 point something percent. But they went to this ranked choice, is what they call it, and you plugged in an algorithm, and then said the Democrat won. I mean, it was close. It was within 1,000, or just a few thousand votes, but that was crazy.
Well, the ranked choice, I don't agree with that, and I think the reason why the Democrats were for it in Maine and Republicans not is because it favored the Democrats. Because you essentially, and most people, I don't know how many people know about this in New Hampshire, but I mean, you get to vote twice. You vote for your fringe candidate, like let's say, and this is really more of a Democratic thing. So you vote for your really green candidate who has no chance in hell of winning. But you also know that if someone doesn't get over 50%, your second choice, so you vote for the second choice, who's the mainstream Democrat. And this is what happened with Poloquin.
It is.
And I don't think it's right.
I think it was done in reaction to Paul LePage's first election, when he did not win a majority. He won a plurality. And it was because the Democrat was a really weak woman, Libby Mitchell, and then they had a very strong independent whose name I can't remember. He lives right over in Cape Elizabeth. But he, anyway, I can't remember his name. So there was a three-way split, and Poloquin got the pluralities. I mean, not Poloquin, LePage.
Yeah.
So he got in, and that chapped the Democrats
Yeah.
badly. So that's when the movement began. When I would be down in South Portland, I'd get people hitting, we want to sign this petition for ranked choice. No, I don't support that, but people coming up to me constantly, and finally it did pass by referendum process. I used to support, and I don't anymore when I see what's happening with it. But anyway, that's another story. And to prevent, it was for Democrats to hold on to power, and they thought this was the way to do it, and not. Anyway.
Yeah, it was. I don't agree with it either. I mean, it's just bad government. It's sort of like gerrymandering. I mean, the Republicans did great with the gerrymandering when they got in all these state offices 6 or 8 years ago. So that's
nationwide.
Nationwide.
Yeah.
So that's bad, and this is bad too. I mean, it's really cooking the system.
Okay, so we were looking for a blue wave, and then was it a blue wave? I suppose it was. I mean, probably a pretty typical, first term off year election for a president, and loses about the same amount of votes. He didn't lose quite as many as Obama did in his first midterm, but he lost a lot. I mean,
well, the Republicans usually do better in midterms. Generally speaking, just because they tend to they vote more, and they're older voters, just generally speaking, and so, and as we know, that Obama got, as he called it, shellacked in his midterm. But this was, for the Republican side, this was the worst beating since Watergate. Like they're more
since the 70s when Nixon
right after
was,
Nixon, whatever it was, 74, and I think 74 was the midterm it was. So
Yeah.
This hasn't been as bad a midterm since then within the Republicans, because they usually don't do so bad. And and I think it's another weakness of Trump that he didn't acknowledge. He kept saying that you did great, that the Republicans did great, and George W. Bush acknowledged that when he got whooped in his midterms, and Obama certainly did. I mean, part of that is just there is a certain, don't you get tired at some point of Trump not telling the truth? I mean, just fundamentally, the things are just, it's the Khashoggi. No, I don't believe him. It's the midterms. No, I don't believe it. We did really well.
It's tiresome, but he's always been that way.
Yeah, that's the way he is.
Yeah. So you take the whole package. I mean, I wish that he were not.
But at some point,
I think because he'd be able to implement far more of his program, his platform, and it'd be much smoother, and you'd think that the businessman in him would realize, use a little bit of honey, and you're going to get a lot further in the things that you want to accomplish. But he's just stubborn or obtuse. I'm not sure. But yet, I'm not sure anyone else could have been able to do what he's done.
What has he done?
Because he's a junkyard dog.
But what has he done?
What has he done?
Literally, what has he done? He got the tax package through, but you had all branches of government going one way, so that was pretty easy. That's what Republicans like to do. The deficit's going through the roof, so that's throwing out the old Republican platform. And you get a Supreme Court, but we knew if a Republican won, you'd get that anyway. So, literally, what has he done? There's nothing, and I know you're going to go say he got a pipeline in Nebraska through the Keystone. But he hasn't, really, there's nothing, the China thing, all he's done, he's created this crisis with the tariffs, and we don't know where that's going yet. North Korea.
He has implemented an America First program that does not look at huge trade agreements from a global perspective. He pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accords, which I think was a good thing, as Emmanuel Macron is finding out now. That this, I know where you are. We've gone back and forth many times, folks, on this issue. He's a true believer in human-caused climate change. I am not. Trump isn't.
Tom doesn't believe in science, so
Tom believes in science, but Tom realizes that scientists are human beings that are just as willing to prostitute themselves for grant money as any other kind of
Sure,
academic.
but there's this science. When we had acid rain, did you believe that there was acid rain?
Science.
When we had that, like when there was
Yes,
a
I
hole in
did,
the ozone.
actually.
What about
I
the
did.
hole in the ozone?
Because acid rain was manifested itself. You go to any cemetery and look at the marble gravestones, and you see that they are
And you don't think
disintegrating.
global warming is?
So there it is. No, I don't see that the polar ice cap has shrunk. I don't see that the Himalayan glaciers have disappeared. I don't see that snow has become a thing of the past in the Northeast. All of the things.
We've had the warmest.
All of the things that Al Gore and his minions predicted have not come true. And so if you are a scientist and you make predictions based on your scientific hypothesis, and those predictions do not pan out, then there's something wrong with that science.
They have to,
Unless, of course, it
Tom,
is associated with political pressure, in which case you just fudge them over.
The fact that you deny the science, and I don't have them at the top of my list here because I'll bring them in next time, but the oceans have increased in the temperature by 1 or 2 Celsius degrees. The Gulf of Maine is increasing faster, the temperature is increasing faster than any other big body in the world. There are no lobsters in Connecticut anymore. There won't be any lobsters in Maine in 10 years because of the warmth. I mean, that's just a fact. These things it's just a fact. We've had the warmest temperatures in over the last 10 to 15 to 20 years. Every year we're setting a global temperature. How can you not believe that? I mean, they're actually facts.
The last 2 years, they haven't. They just haven't. And these models are based on, that's what they are. They're computer models.
No, it's the reality. They measure it.
And they keep adjusting them. Their predictions when it doesn't
prediction.
pan.
You don't think that
out.
oceans?
I do believe that oceans and continents the climate changes. I believe in climate change. Anyone who's studied history has to acknowledge climate change.
Over 10,000 years.
Over millions of years. There have been 4 ice ages where we sit, over the last 2 million years.
Right.
So what?
But do you believe
clearly
that?
global cooling, and then there was global warming.
But do you believe that there were
when there was no evidence of human activity at all?
But it took millions of years, right? So what's obvious that in 150 years, we've accelerated. The temperature of the ocean has gone up a couple of degrees in 50 years. Unprecedented. I'll bring in the facts next time we do it. I just don't understand.
Oops. Forgot to do this.
Yeah. I mean, I could understand that I would have a little bit of respect for your argument if you would say, yes, I see that the climate is changing very rapidly, but it has nothing to do with humans. That would I understand, but the fact that you just...
That's what I say. That is exactly my belief.
But the climate is changing incredibly fast, more than ever before.
I don't say it's more than ever before, no, because the one thing that interests me very much, one of my real avocations is paleoarchaeology. So when did the first humans come to this area? The earliest evidence in New Hampshire seems to be up around Jefferson, that there were people there 12,000 years or so ago. And that was right as the glaciers retreated from that particular area. From my area over in western Maine, not far from here as the crow flies, it was probably 10,000, 10,500, somewhere in there. So in about 1,500 years, or 500 years, depending on the different disagreements about what, that it retreated that far, and then it continued. But then it would advance again, and then it would retreat again.
Right.
So it started retreating at about 20,000 years ago, and it got beyond the St. Lawrence River Valley up into the Hudson Bay area by about. Let's see, about 12 or 15,000, no, actually Hudson Bay about 13 or 14,000 years ago. And now it's still there in the Greenland ice cap. I mean, that's how far it's retreated.
What's your point?
So my point is that it's happened,
no,
and
but
that's
takes,
rapid.
But it was
very rapid.
But rapid is thousands of years. Rapid is thousands of years. You're talking about 10,000 years, for these ice ages to come and go. That's not 150 years. That's not, I mean, the changes are like this. Now 150 years ago, whoop, it's like that. I mean.
Okay, in 150 years, over thousands of years, I said that it retreated from Long Island, which was the terminus, up to, where it is now in Greenland. But within that several millennia time span, you had periods where it would retreat, retreat. So
Over thousands of years.
So over 100, you used a 150-year model. There was rapid global warming for those kinds of intervals, and then it would come back again, and it would act like a bulldozer kind of. I mean, it would advance and it would retreat, and it would advance and it would retreat, and when it does, it leaves things called moraines, which is like a bulldozer pushing up some dirt, and then it comes back, and then it goes back a little further and pushes up some more, so it's got there, and then another pile there, and they're perpendicular to the movement of the glacier, and they're all, you can see them all over New England, especially Maine and New Hampshire. And so there have been periods where there was rapid global warming for those periods during those intervals, and then it would end, and it would advance again.
Well, we're not gonna settle that. So I'll bring in my facts next time. You bring in yours, because I don't believe it. I think, I can understand if you said, oh, by the way, I don't think it's human caused.
I don't believe it's human caused. No.
How can you not believe in the science? I mean, it's the greenhouse effect. I mean, if you believe in acid rain, if you believe in the ozone was depleted because of hydrocarbons, how can you just not? That's what amazes me about. And I suppose the dinosaurs were around 5,000 years ago. That's what you believe?
No, that is not what I believe.
I thought that's what the evangelicals believe, that the dinosaurs.
I'm not an evangelical.
Oh, okay.
No, and I've only met 2 evangelicals who believed that in my entire time of discussing any kind of religion in the context of
Well, I just don't know what
history.
stuff that you believe and don't believe. I'm trying to understand your borders. You don't believe in science.
You're saying that as a way of trying to be sarcastic, and no, we've gone back and forth with this many times.
With the climate?
Many people on the left, especially people that have no religious belief or are agnostic, they think that Christians believe in a 6,000-year-old Earth, according to the book of Genesis. And I don't, like I said, I've only met 2 people who actually believe that.
Yeah, okay, that's good. I'm just trying to understand where the beliefs stop.
But
and
I
where
would
the
say
science
there are
begins.
thousands of lefties who believe that we believe it.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Well, you're one of them.
I don't believe that. I was asking you because I don't know where your belief. It's about
You've already
believing.
asked me that before, and
It's
I've
all
already
about-
answered. Asked and answered, Judge.
Okay.
Move on.
Well, I got to check. Well, if you don't believe in science, I have to check the boundaries of when
Well,
you
I
stop
believe in
believing.
science. What I understand is that politics prostitutes science, and politics trumps science, especially when it comes to the United Nations, and especially when it comes to the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric
Well, what about the
Administration,
Trump's
and
own
their
government?
studies.
What about the report? Then I don't know who put it out. What about the report that just came out a month ago? It's Trump's own government that sounded the alarm for what's going on with the climate. Is that they're accelerating more than they expected? Is that those guys are all politicized in the Trump administration?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's the belief and the reason. I always try to take a temperature of the stuff that you want to believe, and which crowds out the reason. And
Trump
reality.
is not in control of his government.
Okay.
Okay. What about the French revolt over carbon taxes? Getting to real politic. I mean, he alone has taken steps to implement the Paris Climate Accord. And how long did that last? 5 days? And it looked as though there was, some people were looking at a civil war, predicting it in France. There were riots, not by Muslim teenagers that were burning 200 cars in a weekend like they did so many weekends. This was an entirely different political dynamic. And it wasn't a left-right thing either. I mean, it seemed to be a rural French reaction because it was diesel fuel that he pumped up the taxes on. And he said this is to prevent, people from, wean people away from fossil fuels, and starting with diesel. And it was guys who drove tractors and trucks and stuff, and small business people, and they just said, look what they did, holy smokes. I mean, then he backed off immediately.
Well, he when you say backed off, I mean he didn't, because the France has, they just have very high gasoline taxes, right? They have. It's like $5.50 for a gallon of gasoline in France. Yeah. And it was interesting, they called them the Yellow Jackets.
Yeah.
Right, and they call them the yellow jackets because you have to have a yellow vest in your car, which is kind of weird. That's France, right?
Well, it's like having a flare, you know,
but
in case something
you
breaks
have
it down,
to.
right?
I think it's a law.
A mandate, yeah.
So you're not mandated in Maine to have flares in your car.
No.
I mean,
No.
common sense, maybe, but not mandated. So that's that's French right there, right? And so to me, I'm not sure what the point is. I mean, to me, it's just another example of the problem with the have-nots in the world. I mean, it's just all those rural, and when you read about some of those stories, and we don't know France very well, but you think of France as wine and, right? I mean, just everybody's Paris cafes and sipping coffee, but there's a big chunk of rural France that's very poor. And that's what these are the people, like you're saying, just regular people, regular jobs.
I wouldn't call them poor. I would say that they're certainly not wealthy. I mean,
no, they're poor. I mean, they're poor. I mean, I've read stories about them, and I mean, I'm just saying that genesis came from people who, they're not protesting because they're against climate change policy. They're protesting because the tax is too high. And it's a have-not thing. They're saying the taxes are too high. This is ridiculous. We need gasoline, blah, blah, blah. And so, but where it comes from is the fact that they just don't see just like in our country, in a lot of rural America, they're not seeing their wages increase. And I've read the New York Times, my favorite newspaper, had a lot of stories about these just regular people out in the French countryside who barely make it. Just barely make it, just like the rural disenfranchisement, many of the places in our country where there's rural disenfranchisement, which led to Trump. I mean, it's a populist revolt. So I don't know what to make of it. It surprised me. I mean, just surprising. We don't know much about France, so something like this happens, and it's very interesting. And to me, it's just an indication is that the world has to be careful about this continuing imbalance between the have and have-nots. I'm not sure what the solution is. But that's where a lot of this comes from.
Well, I see it differently. I think that these people in France, if they're at all like the people in the United States in the rural areas, in the red-blue divide, here we have, the rural country. Take Oxford County, Maine, and the 2nd District in Maine, went for Poloquin and went for Trump, alone in all of New England. But unlike, the 1st District or the coastal elites, and if you look at it from a nationwide, it's probably a similar situation in France. But the coastal elites look at the country bumpkins and flyover country and say, well, these people are stupid. I mean, they're deplorables. They're hanging on to their bitter clingers, as Obama called them, and they, I smell them when I go to Walmart, said that FBI guy that has since been fired. That's the rural people understand that's how they're viewed by the coastal elites. And these people in France, I saw that kind of dynamic in a couple of analyses that I read, that they say, well, you want me to pay more to run my farm tractor so that other people can put up windmills and solar panels in and around Paris and in the suburbs. No, I don't want to do that. And then following this diesel tax hike is going to be a gasoline tax hike, and then other fossil fuel tax hikes. So Macron had a whole schedule of things. This was step one. And so they said, we don't agree with this. We don't want to pay for this. And plus, they don't believe in the so-called science of climate change. They simply don't.
I don't believe that. I'm not saying I don't believe what you're saying, but to me, it's just so fundamental an economic issue. So all the things you're talking about just plays right into why should the people without the money be taxed, and the people with the money have the advantages, and it happens. And you always call them elitist, which is kind of just why do you such name calling like that? I mean it's just kind of you're calling the pot calling the kettle black when you say that. I mean, let's face it, this economy, where is it growing? I mean, what is pushing this economy and growing it. It's the people on our coast, in the urban areas, near the universities. I mean, it's just fundamentally an economic situation. It's not about being elite or something, but that's where it's happening. 100 years ago, it was in the farm country, in the middle of the country, but that's just not the way it works anymore. And the manufacturing has changed, as we know. So it just happens that all the economic power are on those areas of the country. They are. It just is. Same with Maine. I mean, Oxford County doesn't have a whole lot going on. You know, a lot of the industries have been gutted. Unfortunately, the mills and so forth. I grew up in a paper mill. I'm sympathetic to all that, but it's just an economic issue. And I think you would serve this discussion better instead of just putting it in terms of elitists and so forth. Is just recognizes that both parties have to do something to even out the have-not situation. I don't know what it is.
When we're characterized as deplorables and irredeemables and bitter clingers, then we get a view of how Democrat elites view us. And so if we say a few names back, call them elitists,
okay, so
then that's name-calling, but the deplorables and the bitter clingers is not name-calling.
No, I'm not making an excuse for that. I'm just saying for you. Like, why even propagate that? Why continue it?
I'm trying to understand.
Hillary said deplorable, one thing. I could come up with, I don't have a list now, 1,000 things that Trump has said that are way worse than one thing that he said about what Hillary said about the poor. That's the false equivalency with all this stuff, is that Hillary, it was stupid for her to say the deplorables. You know, it was ridiculous. It was stupid for Obama to say that the real people they're clinging on to their guns and Bibles, you know. But that's like the one stupid thing he said that way. And here you have Trump, what he says about everybody every day, and we're numb to it. I mean, we're just absolutely numb to it. I mean, he denigrates our institutions. He denigrates people all the time. And you just let it go. You just let it go.
I don't let it go. I have criticized him. I reluctantly voted for him. But I will vote for him again in 2020 if present trends continue.
Well, then that's your moral values about that. I mean, here's the guy that wanted Hussein out because he was a thug. Right? You supported the invasion of Iraq because Hussein was a thug.
No, that isn't why I supported the invasion of Iraq.
One of your columns had him as a thug and he had to go.
I wrote several columns about that, and I recall my reasons for supporting that war were basically the same reasons that John Kerry supported it and Hillary Clinton supported it, because they looked at the intelligence. Okay, yes, Kerry said, well, I was against it before I was for it, as he famously said in 2004 running for president. They all supported it because of the intelligence. They believed that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. They believed that he was on the way to getting nuclear weapons, and that we know he had other weapons of mass destruction, at least when he fought the Iranians in the 80s. So where did they go? We didn't find them when we invaded Iraq. So, okay. Well, to me, that was the biggest reason why I supported it.
I didn't support it because there was a lot of evidence to show that there weren't.
Not at that time. There wasn't.
Yes, there was. There was a lot of skeptics. out there. A lot of people didn't support it. A lot of George H.W. Bush's people, Skalkoff, whatever his name was. There were a lot of people that came out and
they didn't support it, but not because they didn't believe there were weapons of mass destruction.
Well, I don't know about that nuance, but they didn't support it. So even if you believe there were weapons of mass destruction, it doesn't matter. We can fight that battle again, but it was whatever.
The intelligence was wrong.
The intelligence was cooked.
Well, okay. I mean, I don't know what.
Yeah, but a lot of people, it doesn't matter. So the intelligence was a colossal failure for sure, but it doesn't mean you still had to support the war.
Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yeah. Well, most people, but that's not. A lot of the conservatives supported it not because of the weapons of mass destruction.
The neocons.
The neocons, right.
Allied with Israel.
There was a whole nother wing of that to free the. Yeah. I remember this. I remember talking to conservatives now that we're talking about it, who said, "Look, there's this huge middle class in Iraq. Once we free them, they're going to uprise, and it's going to change the Middle East." So that was big a
and bring democracy to the Middle East. Yeah,
that
was a pie in the sky.
Yeah. Yep. Well, we learn. Some of us make
Hopefully
mistakes.
We will
some
learn.
of us make mistakes on our decisions, and some of us are right.
I see. A majority of non-citizens, this is according to an article in the Washington Examiner, yesterday, including those with legal green cards, are tapping into welfare programs set up to help poor and ailing Americans. This is according to the Census Bureau. In a new analysis of the latest numbers from 2014, so that's 4-year-old data, 63% of non-citizens are using a welfare program, and it grows to 70% for those here 10 years or more, confirming another concern that once immigrants tap into welfare, they don't get off it. The numbers, 4,684,000 non-citizen households receiving welfare. So that's households and not individuals. And half of them are illegals. So we hear rhetoric that they're not on welfare or they can't get welfare, but they do. They simply do. And that's one thing LePage did in Maine, for example. He said general assistance, which is the locally administered, state reimbursed form of welfare, like selectmen and mayors and so forth will administer general assistance and then get back a good portion of it, more than half, from the state. And so LePage said Portland will not get general assistance for non-citizens. So it just goes to show what happened with so-called immigration reform in 1965, when prior to that, we were able, anyone who wanted to come in here legally, they had to be sponsored by somebody, and they had to go to work. They were not eligible for any kind of general assistance or any assistance that we now call welfare. And if they did become indigent, they were the responsibility of their sponsor. Their sponsor would have to, pay for their support. And so this is what our immigration system has become, and it's it's one of the reasons I think why Trump got so much support when he said we're going to build a wall, we're going to stop it, and why he still is in trying to stop this caravan of people, which is the latest manifestation of it. I'm done.
Okay. I mean, I agree that, I think Obama made a mistake by not touting what he did for immigration, because he had this huge program of deportations in his administration. I don't know the numbers, but hugely. And people were critical. The left wing of Democrats were very critical of that. During the last 4 years, there was an out-migration, more Mexicans going that way across the border than coming in. So the trend was going in the right direction. And I think everybody agrees, including the Democrats, that we have to control our borders. And so I agree fundamentally with what Trump tapped into that successfully. I'm saying politically. I'm saying Obama missed the chance, and Hillary did for that matter. But they didn't want to talk about what they have done for immigration, because that would have alienated some of the more radical wing of their own party. So, but yeah, I agree with you that immigration has to be controlled. We have to control our borders. And is Trump doing it ham-handedly a little bit? Yes, but it is a thorny issue, and I commend him for at least trying it, even if it's ham-handed. But I would also argue is that our country's been moving in that direction for years anyway. I mean, with the Mexican border, and the truth is that the only way we're going to stop that outside is building a wall, which isn't happening. That's another promise that's broken. There's no wall being built. There's not going to be any ever funding. They're not going to make Mexico pay for it. So that was just another political trick, if you will. But the only way we're going to stop it, the immigration in Central American countries, is to somehow have their economies improve the way the Mexican economy, which isn't still super, but it's keeping a lot of the Mexicans at home. And Vicente Fox, the ex-president, actually, and this is another thing that Trump, which I commend him for the new NAFTA agreement, even though it was long overdue, but he talked about breaking all the agreements, but he didn't. But we have a new NAFTA agreement, which is basically like the old NAFTA agreement with some improvements. Even Chuck Schumer supported it. Yeah. So, I just don't. I mean, I think I agree with you on the immigration. When you get into the weeds of something of a few thousand people getting support when they shouldn't, I really don't have an answer for that. Do I think it's fundamentally right or wrong?
Almost 5 million households, not a few thousand people. So that would translate probably over 10 million people. honestly speaking.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't refute those numbers. I don't know if that's true or
It's
not.
from the census data. So I think that you say that neither Democrats nor Republicans want open borders. I don't think that's true. I think there are some Republicans who want open borders. Will never say so. And most Democrats want open borders, but will never say so. And that what they say instead is abolish ICE. We should abolish ICE. Well, what's the point of abolishing ICE? Immigration and I forget what ICE stands for, the acronym, but it's this whole idea of asylum. That's what's driving these the Central Americans from coming up, is that they say if they apply for asylum, they say, I'm afraid of gangs or I'm afraid of whatever in my home country, and they can be allowed in if they come back for a hearing to adjudicate whether or not they have legitimate basis for asylum, which they don't. And if they come back in a year or 2 years, and hardly any of them come back. They disappear into the United States. And so that is a de facto open borders policy. And that's what drives them up. And so when Trump, puts up barbed wire on top of the fence so that it makes it harder for them to get over it, and sets up, refugee camp there and across the border from San Diego, then the word gets back, well, I guess this doesn't work anymore. They're not going to allow us in. So, maybe it's not worth trekking across Mexico to get
your broad
there.
generalizations are always broad generalizations. All Democrats don't support ICE. We had, 10 Democratic candidates for abolishing it. We had 10 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, 10 Democratic candidates for Congress. Nobody wanted to abolish ICE. It's just that I'm sure there are some that do. And the thing is about and we know that most illegals come in through visas, getting legitimate visas, and then they just stay here.
That's true.
So there's a whole abuse, and I always think that, I've always thought, I shouldn't say always think, I've always thought that, and this is the hypocrisy of you Republicans, is that all you have to do is clamp down the employers.
I agree.
All you have to do is clamp down the employers. Because if the employers couldn't hire illegal immigrants, problem solved.
Or say you're not eligible for welfare.
Clamped on. Most people are coming here for jobs, and they get jobs, and they're employed. But if there was, that's all. That would be a huge step if you just clamp down on business, Republican business. But they don't want to do that because the Southern California would go away if we didn't have all those.
Those would be businesses that have their payroll on the table.
Yeah.
But there's so many under the table work. Those people that go on welfare, the many welfare programs I just mentioned. Well, I didn't mention the particular program. Right. Some form of welfare. Not to mention the cost of educating their kids.
See, I just have
which is $15,000 a year per kid.
Yeah.
So,
and they'll go to college and be productive members of society.
Maybe.
I see. I just don't think though. I just don't think the problem is. I just don't think those. If this was 1910, 1880, so we had a bunch of land that people could go live in. All the immigrants, when we welcomed all the immigrants from Europe, because we had the space for them and we wanted them. Then I would support the immigration. But the reality is there's too many people in the world, right? And that's fundamentally, immigration is a result of too many people in the world, and it's a huge global problem. But within that, I don't think that people who are moving here I don't believe what Trump says, they're full of murderers and drug addicts and welfare queens. I don't. I think most of the people, by far, a huge majority of them, immigrants who work here are just regular people who want to better their lives, and they do.
But 2 out of 3 are on welfare.
2 out of 3 illegal immigrants in the whole.
Legal and illegal.
2 out of 3 out of the millions.
63%.
I don't know how many people who are first generation here, but you're saying all those 50 million people or whatever number it is, they're all on welfare?
Well, this
what about the
revised
dreamers?
up to 22
what about
million
all these
officially.
dreamers? They're all on welfare? I don't think so.
People with green cards and people without green cards, immigrants, 63%, according to U.S. Census data 2014. Now it's 4 years old. I expect it's worse now. And so how many billions get wired back to Mexico, to El Salvador, to Honduras, and so forth? Because what?
I thought they weren't working. How are they wiring the money back?
They are working under the table. I know a lot of people, some of my relatives, who would collect various government benefits and work under the table, and they did a whole lot better than I was doing, working, straight job. So it happens, and they find out. We got 5 minutes left.
Wow. Okay.
Holy smokes.
Did we go to number 2?
No, we didn't. It always
That's a
flies
special
by.
holiday edition with you, Tom.
A holiday edition of what?
Have to have a longer holiday edition.
Of
Keep your viewers-
our show?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the presidency of George H.W. Bush?
Oh gosh.
Me first?
Yeah, I'll go. I'll go. I mean, I think he represented. I mean, he really did represent. This is nothing that anybody has not said, but he really did represent a certain decency, and it's kind of interesting that he really was. And we've lost that. I'm not sure it's good or bad, but there really was sort of this. He was a WASP. I mean, Andover, Yale. I mean, classic WASP. But there was a sense in this country that we accepted that kind of aristocracy. I mean, we kind of did. I mean, we looked up to those people. They served they put public service first, and so obviously George Bush was an incredibly decent person. But I look at what he represented in terms of the context, the societal context of him being just a classic rich guy WASP with those sensibilities that we talked about, putting country first, be self-aware, and all that. And we've lost that. We seem to have lost that right now, for good or ill. And I'm not sure, but we did accept a certain. That was our aristocracy.
For ill, I think it's the evidence has accumulated. And yeah, he was decent, and I voted against him. The only opportunity I would have had to vote for against him in '92, and that was when I was still in the transition from being a lefty to being a conservative, becoming one. And I voted for Bill Clinton in 1992. I'm ashamed to say so, but it's true, even though I could deny it because there's no record.
I voted for Bush.
Yeah. See, how about that?
Yeah.
Well. He was a good man. I was wrong. And I voted for him because, again, along with this WASP aristocracy background of his, those guys became CIA agents. And he wasn't an agent, but he was appointed director, and he fit right in with many at that time who were, that's the CIA recruited from Harvard and Yale and heavily, and especially from the earliest days on when it was OSS. So yeah, he fit in, but I was being, my heritage of being a left-wing Democrat during the 70s and 80s, looked at the CIA as evil. And so that was really what made me, vote for Clinton. I didn't vote for Clinton so much as I voted against H.W. because of his CIA background.
Surprised you didn't
but
vote.
I was wrong.
I'm
Again,
surprised you
one of
didn't
the
vote.
other mistakes I made. I had to believe I made actually two. that have been,
I'm surprised you didn't vote for Perot. It was
Yeah.
Perot that really cost him the election.
It was. It really was.
Because he took what, like 15% of the vote, or it was a lot.
Yeah, somewhere between 15 and 20. Yeah, it is a lot. And yeah, he wouldn't. If Perot hadn't been in the election, Bush would have gone a second term, I think. But yeah, no, Perot turned out to be kind of nutty. It was, but he was not. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't as nutty as I thought. I recently read a book called "I Love Capitalism" by Ken Langone. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's one of the Home Depot founders. 1 minute left. Anyway, he was involved with that campaign. He worked for Ross Perot and his company at the time. It was long before Home Depot, and it's. Yeah,
Well, Ross Perot was our first national figure who was a populist. He tapped into that.
No politics at all. Went straight for the presidency. Didn't get it, but now we have a guy who did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
For 4 years anyway.
For 4 years anyway.
Because the demographics are way against you. We didn't talk about that, but.
Yeah, because of all these, well,
no, because of
undocumented Democrats coming across the border. No.
Because the suburbanites, college-educated women, you name it. I mean, you get there's only a few of you old guys left.
As anachronistic old white guys.
Yeah. I'm one of them, but so.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're out of time,
Okay.
and thank you for coming.
Okay.
And
Always a pleasure.
again, we always go off on these tangents, but it's fun, nonetheless, and No, that's what we're here for,
Sure.
left and right.
Thanks, Tom. We'll see you
Yeah.
next month.
Good to see you.
Yep. Is it
All right.
next year? When am I on again?
Yeah, we'll be next year.
Yeah.
Right, 4 weeks. Okay.
Okay,
I'll
thank
send you
you.
a reminder.
Okay.
Bye-bye, folks.